Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 23 Annual General Meeting of CLINUVEL Pharmaceuticals Limited. It's good to see the meeting is well attended and to note that many stakeholders are online watching the webcast. For those in the room who don't know me, my name is Willem Blijdorp and I'm the Chair of the Board of Directors and the designated Chair of today's meeting. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of which we meet today and pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. First, I ask all mobile phones and all other electronic devices please be turned off. If you need to use the bathrooms, they can be found outside the doors to your right and others at the end of the foyer. As we have a quorum, I'm pleased to declare the meeting open. I will now introduce your directors. Joining me here on the right is our Managing Director, CEO Philip Wolgen, and with me are our non-executive directors, Mr. Sue Smith, Dr. Karen Aggesborg, Professor Jeffrey Roosevelt, and Professor Sir Andrew Liekeman, and Brenda Senenen. Also in the attendance is our Company Secretary and CFO, Mr. Darren Kamey, Michael Cunningham, audit partner of the Grant Thornton Australia. The company's auditor is also present. Before we continue, I would like to make an address to the meeting. Today, I will speak about three things: our company, the current climate, and my position as chairman. First, about the company. I want to know what investors in Australia, New Zealand, Europe and the United States think about the company and current management. I spoke in total with 21 shareholders, new investors, proxy advisors and our own staff, representing 50% of our share register. As part of good governance, our EI manager and I reached out to learn how current management is viewed by all. Without exception, shareholders and new investors are in favor of Philip and his management team, maintaining current strategy and completing the overall mission. They do not want to change. I was somewhat surprised because I received some questions on CLINUVEL strategy and the time to reach new markets. The view is that shareholders want the team to complete the journey it started. And as a board, we have to consider this. You can ask whether the 15% is a large enough sample, but for now I say it is because we also know that another 30% openly says to stay invested in CLINUVEL, since his management team is aligned with their interests. As a board, we are speaking to our CFO, CSO and CAO to understand whether they are prepared and willing to complete the mission to build a diversified house. We hope to report to you before Christmas how the discussion with CFO, CSO and CEO have concluded. It's the board and the shareholders' strong view that the various development and commercial plans are completed by 2026. And that no or minimal disruption take place in the company. I learned a lot from directly getting feedback from the shareholders. The feedback was very frank and positive, since it was recognized that we are telling a special story, but there also commitments they wish to development could be done faster. I understand this. But in pharmaceuticals, one cannot cut corners and accelerate things. Money and people is not sufficient. The shareholders I spoke said they do not want to sell their shares even when the share price was low. The current climate. I can speak hours about economies, currencies, inflations, state of the world, but I want to attract your attention to CLINUVEL's financial strategy. The board has spoken many years with our CEO, and he explained often how pharmaceutical companies are like addicts. They need frequent and more cash without increasing the risk of success, since things take much longer. Our management team also explained how new economic uncertainty could lead to less available cash for innovators such as CLINUVEL. We are exactly in that point of the cycle. No cash available, for new ideas. Therefore, our management team changed the financial strategy and tried to optimize smaller clinical programs to obtain more information, and less money was spent. Today, you see the results of this financial strategy. CLINUVEL is becoming independent and has a strong balance sheet. Very few companies are building assets without dilution of shareholders. Because of our management team calculates risks, it arrives at today's position. Some of you love it. Some of you want to see this cash spent faster and want change in strategy. However, spending more and faster funds does not increase chances of success. This board has been involved in many businesses, but very few have managed the finance like this. Management team has, and this gives all the shareholders confidence and security that the company can operate with being at risk. This is worth more than you can imagine. Only look at the AX and Nasdaq to understand the number of companies entering financing at high interest rates, since equity raisings are impossible. I'm very content that I have been part of this approach by our management team. I hope they continue this journey. My position as chairman. The past year, I have seen many of my goals achieved. I give you a few. Providing guidance on commercial strategy, preparing the photo-cosmetic strategy, assisting on M&A questions, simplifying the executive contracts, assisting in tax matters. Now I want to see this company grow to several billions in market cap. And it has all the possibilities to do so. Therefore, I am re-elected as a director today. If I am re-elected as a director today, I will do my best to see us all realize these goals. After 4 years as chairman, it's time to hand over my responsibilities, and I'm pleased to announce our new incoming chair, Professor Jeffrey Roosevelt. He's based here in Melbourne. Professor Roosevelt will take on the position of chair of the CLINUVEL Group from the 1st of January 2024. Assuming he is re-elected. Today, Professor Roosevelt is a distinguished medical professional with a long-standing record of community service. He is well qualified to chair the company, and I wish him well in his new role. Finally, I would like to conclude by thanking all the stakeholders who have supported the company during the last year. Firstly, patients and their families who continue to support our approved products and development programs, as well as the physicians who provide life-changing care. The loyalty of shareholders is highly appreciated, reflected in our 6 dividend payments. We would not have achieved the financial results and the advances in the company's expansion initiatives over the past year without our employees. I want to publicly thank them all for their hard work and commitments. The leadership of Dr. Wolgen is critical for the company's success and progress, and I can advise that we are considering all options in the lead up to expiring of his contract on the 30th June 25. I leave it to another time to provide more detail. I'm also fortunate to have chaired a focused board that collaborates well. I would like to acknowledge and thank Sir Andrew Liikeman for his contribution to the board during his tenure, which comes to an end today. We wish him well in his many interests and future endeavors. Thank you for your kindness the past years, and I look forward to continuing my contribution to the company. Thank you for your attention. I will now delegate the chairing of the meeting to Professor Jeffrey Roosevelt. I invite him to the stage to say a few words about moving into the position of chair, and he will use this opportunity to address the room on his re-election. Professor Roosevelt will then explain the agenda for the meeting and conduct the general business of the meeting. Professor Roosevelt will also coordinate any questions received on the resolutions and will moderate questions after the formal part of the meeting. I now hand over to Professor Roosevelt.
Thank you, Mr. Blijdorp. Good morning, everyone. I hope to be re-elected today, and if I am, the board has chosen me as the incoming chair. 1st of January. I am interim chair at this time. I have been a CLINUVEL board director for 4 years and have a deep understanding of the business. In Australia, the probability of commercial success of new drug development from basic science is low. The number of new technologies that generate millions of dollars is rare. CLINUVEL has succeeded where many other pharmaceutical companies have failed. It is a privilege to be a board member and to chair the board of CLINUVEL. I'm impressed with CLINUVEL because its drugs transform the lives of people with major health problems, particularly serious disorders of the skin. Imagine having erythropoietic porphyria, which causes severe skin reaction and pain when exposed to sunlight, and following SCENESSE administration being able to live normally. Now, I derive my leadership skills and experience from my many decades of holding leadership positions in medicine, universities, business, and in the military, where I reached the senior rank of Major General. I am highly respected for my integrity and character. I lead by example. I have strong personal discipline and a determination to succeed. I always aspire to excellence in whatever I do, and I have great ambition for the organisations I work in, including CLINUVEL. I provide strong advocacy when required. I'm used to building strong, cohesive and collegiate teams. I always treat people inside and outside organisations with respect. These traits have led to success, and I intend to ensure they are instilled throughout our organisation. I also bring experience in clinical translation of basic biomedical research and commercialisation of medical technology. I wish to thank the outgoing chairman, Mr. Willem Blijdorp, for his sage advice to the board and the company. We have benefited greatly from his extensive business experience. I wish to also thank Professor Sir Andrew Liikeman, who leaves our board after this AGM. His advice has been greatly appreciated. I wish to also thank my fellow board members, Dr. Philippe Wolgen, Mr. Darren Keamy, and all our senior management for their contribution to the success of CLINUVEL. I particularly wanted to thank Dr. Dennis Wright as our Chief Scientific Officer. His expertise has significantly helped to transform the application of melanocortins into commercial pharmaceuticals. Not least, I also thank our wonderful staff at CLINUVEL, inter alia, their professionalism, dedication, loyalty, and the excellent customer and client care and support they provide. We affectionately call our team CLINUVELians. I wish to specifically address succession planning, strategy, and value creation. My task will be to oversee with the nomination committee the succession of executives and board members. Succession planning is a board responsibility which our board takes very seriously. There is anticipation in the market as to the plans of Managing Director Dr. Philippe Wolgen and Chief Financial Officer Mr. Darren Keamy. We are in discussion with Dr. Wolgen regarding the option of a contract renewal beyond June 2025. Regardless of this decision, the Remuneration Committee will need to put in place long-term incentives for the CEO. New long-term incentives are currently under consideration. We are in discussion with Mr. Keamy regarding his role when his contract expires in June 2024. As the company continues to grow and increase its global reach, we are also planning to refresh and expand the board. Now on strategy and value creation. The growth of CLINUVEL has surpassed expectations. Dr. Wolgen will explain the details of CLINUVEL's product development, but I and the board support the pharmaceutical and over-the-counter product development plans and the risk management strategy. CLINUVEL has an enviable cash position of Australian dollars 156.8 million as of the 30th of June, and it is, of course, growing. This certainly did not happen by chance. The board is carefully considering a number of options for this, including carefully evaluated merger and acquisition, and we will report back when these are firmed up. The board's wish, and that of many shareholders, I'm sure, is for the management team to complete its mission. CLINUVEL's future could not be more exciting. Let me give you a few examples. CLINUVEL is testing the first systemic drug in patients of colour with vitiligo. They're those white patches that appear on people of dark skin. Very disfiguring and very disabling for the person involved. Xeroderma pigmentosa patients develop skin cancer. CLINUVEL has a drug which promotes the DNA repair of ultraviolet damage to the skin, and this should benefit these patients. CLINUVEL is expanding its footprint into variegated porphyria, another variety of porphyria. CLINUVEL has ongoing trials in stroke, with more clinical applications to come. CLINUVEL is developing capability to manufacture adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, in various formulations for a range of serious conditions. We are also developing a new arm of the business in over-the-counter photocosmetics. This involves establishing a new market base. We plan to increase in-house manufacturing. I am passionate about CLINUVEL, and we will work productively with the board, the managing director, the CFO, the scientific team, and all our staff, and of course our shareholders, to execute our current plans, to grow the company, increase investment in the company, and to increase our profitability. Thank you for your attention. I now move to the agenda of the meeting, commencing with the meeting procedures. Upon registering your attendance at this meeting, you should have received a blue polling card and a yellow card if you are a voting shareholder, or a yellow card only if you are a non-voting shareholder. For those invited guests, you would have received a white admission card. If you do not have a card, could you please return to the registration desk just outside the doors to the right? You will need a blue polling card for your votes to be included as part of the poll on the items of business of the meeting. Only shareholders may ask questions. We will invite questions from the floor on resolutions 1 to 4 at the end of presenting resolution 4 to the meeting and before you move to a poll. To ask a question, you will need to hold up your yellow card should you wish to ask a question at the relevant time, and a microphone will be brought to you. Please wait for the microphone so that your question can be heard by those on the webcast. As a courtesy to the room, could you please clearly state your name when asking questions? Once the formal part of the meeting is complete, we will invite our CEO to make a presentation. After this, we will then move to a question and answer format similar to last year's meeting. This will be hosted by one of Australia's most prominent healthcare analyst teams, Dr. Shane Storey, Dr. Melissa Benson, and Ms. Madeline Williams from Wilson's Advisory. Wilson's has been engaged in the provision of financial services for more than 125 years, and their research capabilities are well known and regarded. The analysts will pose questions to Dr. Wolgen, Mr. Blydorp, and myself based on questions on the business received from shareholders prior to the meeting. After this, I will take questions from the room. We will then close the meeting and we will break out in the foyer outside the room for light refreshments. Please feel free to join us. The formal items of business, which are listed on the screen behind me, the minutes of the last annual general meeting, along with the notice of meeting, are taken as read. The first agenda item is to table the company's financial statements and the directors' and auditors' report for the year ended 30th of June 2023, together with the directors' report and the independent auditor's report as set out in the annual report. No resolution is required. I invite shareholders to ask questions relevant to the conduct of the audit and preparation and content of the auditor's report set out in the annual report. We have our lead audit partner, Mr. Michael Cunningham of Grant Thornton Audit, present at the meeting. He can answer any questions that are relevant to the conduct of the audit and the preparation and content of the auditor's report. Please limit your questions at this time to matters related to the conduct of the audit. There will be time for general questions at the conclusion of the meeting. Questions? Does anyone have a question of the audit? Doesn't look like it. I now propose to move to Resolution 1. Resolution 1 is the adoption of the remuneration report. Resolution 1 is to consider and, if thought fit, to pass a resolution adopting the remuneration report contained in the annual report sent to all shareholders. It should be noted that this vote by shareholders is an advisory vote only and does not serve to bind the company or its directors. However, the board will consider the outcome of the vote when reviewing the remuneration policies of the company. This resolution requires 50% of votes cast by shareholders to be in favour for it to be passed. However, if 25% or more of votes that are cast are voted against the adoption of the remuneration report at 2 consecutive AGMs, shareholders will be required to vote at the second of the AGMs on a spill resolution, that another meeting be held within 90 days at which all the company directors, other than the managing director, must be presented for re-election. There is no requirement to allow for a possible spill resolution at this meeting. as the 2022 remuneration report was accepted by greater than 75% of shares voted in the 2022 annual general meeting. The Board of Directors and key management personnel are not entitled to vote on this resolution. The Directors recommend shareholders to vote in favour of this resolution. The proxies received in respect of this resolution are on the screen behind me. As indicated, this resolution will be decided by a poll, which will be conducted following Resolution 4. I now propose to move to the Resolution 2, the re-election of Mr. Willem Blijdorp as Director, who is retiring by rotation in accordance with Clause 57 of the company's constitution and is eligible for re-election as a director of the company. As Mr. Blijdorp has already addressed the meeting on his re-election, he is not proposing a further address to shareholders on this. The directors, with Mr. Blijdorp abstaining, recommends that shareholders vote in favour of this resolution. The proxies received in respect of this resolution are shown on the screen. I'll give you a moment to vote, and then I will move to the next item of this agenda. Resolution 3, the re-election of myself. As the next item of business concerns my re-election as director, it would be more appropriate if I now invite my fellow director, Mrs. Sue Smith, to address the meeting. Sue.
Thank you, Professor Rosenfeld. Good morning, everyone. The next item of business relates to the re-election of Professor Jeffrey Rosenfeld as a director who is retiring by rotation in accordance with Clause 57 of the company's constitution and is eligible for re-election as a director of the company. As Professor Rosenfeld has also already addressed the meeting on his re-election, he is not proposing a further address to shareholders on his re-election. The directors, with Professor Rosenfeld abstaining, recommends that shareholders vote in favour of this resolution. The proxies received in respect of this resolution are on the screen. I will now pass back to Professor Rosenfeld.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. The next item of business on the agenda is that for the purposes of and in accordance with ASX Listing Rule 7.2, Exception 9, any issue of securities made under the Performance Rights Plan are set out in the explanatory memorandum accompanying and forming part of the Notice of Meeting be approved as an exception to ASX Listing Rule 7.1. In view of their eligibility to participate in the Performance Rights Plan, the directors do not make a recommendation in respect of Resolution 4. The proxies received in respect of this final resolution are shown on the screen. If you have not already done so, could you please cast your votes on these resolutions by completing your blue polling card? A representative of Computershare will shortly instruct the meeting on the poll process and procedure to conduct the poll. I will now facilitate questions on the resolutions only. An opportunity to ask general questions on the business will be given at the end of the meeting. As a reminder, only members of the company holding yellow or coloured cards are eligible to vote. and we ask that you wait for the microphone and introduce yourself before asking a question. Please limit your questions at this time to matters related to the 4 resolutions only. Could you please indicate the resolution to which your question relates? I ask shareholders who may have more than one question or comment to initially ask one question only and allow others to ask questions before you ask further questions. Are you holding a card, sir? Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Adam Pakitko. Questions with regard to resolution number 4. And it's just after some clarification, it mentions renewal of the performance rights plan. So I just wanted to know whether that had any bearing on the upcoming expiration of the 2019 performance rights plan, or was it more directed at the more general employee performance rights plan? Thank you.
Would you mind just repeating that question? I didn't quite catch all of it.
Sure. The 2019 performance rights plan, to my understanding, is due to expire in, I think, November of this year. Just because there's a lot packed up within Resolution 4, I was just after some clarity on whether we're voting for that. We are also voting for that performance right plan to be extended or renewed, or are we just talking about with the specific performance conditions that it had, or are we just talking about a more general performance right plan to the broad employees, not specifically the managing director?
Look, I might direct that question to our managing director, if I may. It's a technical question, which I'm going to pass to the MD.
It's a very simple answer, Mr. Patkinko. The performance rights plan pertain to all staff and employees except the managing director.
Thank you. Thanks, Philippe. Any other question relating to the resolutions? Well, in the light of time, we will now begin the poll detailed in the notice of meeting. I will vote subject to the abstentions noted in the notice of meeting, all available undirected proxies in favour of each resolution. I will close the poll in approximately 30 seconds. If you require any more time, could you please raise your hand to ensure that you are given sufficient time to complete your voting card? I think now all cards have been collected. I now declare the poll closed. I'm getting the thumbs up from Computershare. The final results of the polls will be available later today on the ASX website and on our company website. I now invite Dr. Philippe Wolgen to deliver the Managing Director's address.
Can we dim the light a little bit here? Great. Good. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. And certainly the new Australian institutions that have joined us, both a few in the room and by video live stream. So I'm going to take you back to basics today and then build up the story. There's a lot to pack in the next 20 minutes, so forgive me if it goes very fast. But I'm trying to answer all the questions that have been fielded to us through a presentation. And what you will hear today is very much the total addressable market that we are trying to pursue. Very much the question how and when. But we also talk about value and the increase of assets versus the value that we currently command on the market. So before I start, I do want to forewarn you against forward-looking statements and the risks inherent in our industry. Please, next. So we are starting today with a first question that has been fielded, and that is the when. And so I'm going to share with you the timeline of the next 12 months. And there are 16 catalysts. Since this presentation is published on the ASX, I will leave it in your own time to go through the details, but I'm going to highlight a few of the major issues. And so you've seen recently that we started the vitiligo trial, the 105 study, with a recruitment period of 12 months, a total up to 200 patients. So that is the largest trial that CLINUVEL ever has conducted. We expect the readouts of the XP DNA repair programs, 151 and 156, and we'll talk a little bit later on the depth and why that is so relevant, not only for these patient populations, but for the general population. And we're also looking at the readout of the central nervous system disorders, which is stroke, ischemic stroke, of the patients that have been escalated from moderate to severe. And that is extremely relevant if you look at the safety profile of this product. Then we are launching commercially our first photocosmetic in CSL after the pilot that we conducted. And you will see two financial moments in the year, in February, the half-year results, and in August, the financial full-year results. And so the question that have been posed to us, both by journalists and shareholders, is, the house that you're building, what is that eventually going to look like? And that eventually, I've said, is 25, 26. We need to understand what this all is leading to, and the resources that we allocate towards it actually are worth the effort that we put in. Next one. So for those newcomers, I do want to take you back to the technology, and I've tried to simplify the matter in the key technology that we use. And so imagine that you have a string of seaweeds of 24 amino acids strung together linearly. Now, if you would take a scissor and cut the first 13 out of them, you arrive at our drug, afamelanotide. It is amplified in 2 positions. And if you then further take the scissors and you say, well, we also want to use smaller peptides, you end up with the parvesen phemelanotide. And for those that want to know exactly why that is so relevant, the strength of these molecules, which we call pharmacophores, the fragments, are found in a specific sequence of amino acids, the HISV-ARC trip, that is responsible for what we all wanted for decades, the self-tanning purpose. But if you look then at the sequence, the final sequence, the protease-val, which had 3 amino acids, they are responsible for the anti-inflammatory purpose. So you will find all these active fragments in all the drugs that we use. And the purpose, which is logic, was to build a house around all these melanocortins. And we therefore are the only house in the world that is endeavoring this. Now, on the right-hand side for you, you see a whole long list. And you don't need to go through it in detail, but it suffices to say that everything in gray are all these companies and research groups over 40 years that have attempted to go into melanocortins. There are only 5 left in the field. 2 of those are generic players that have taken amino acids in that sequence and called it melanocortins, and they are distributing ACTH. This one is a smaller generic player. ANI is a company worth 1.1 billion that entered the market 4 years ago. But from the novel molecules, from those that have synthesized new melanocortins, there are only 3 left. That is Palatin, Rhythm, and CLINUVEL. Palatin is a drug that came out of the same university with a market cap of 28 million that has not built a value. Rhythm Pharmaceuticals is a company that pursues the obesity market that's worth 1.3 billion. But none of these companies have ever reached profitability. So this is the context of where we operate. Next one. So let's take a deeper dive in the clinical programs. And we start with the pipeline. So our strategy has been from the beginning, which is quite different than most of our peers, is you focus first and then you open your kimono later by expanding the palette and the suite of indications. And so on the top, you see the EPP market that we're pursuing in various jurisdictions, and then the expansion to the adolescent population that will add 21% to the market size overall. And recently we announced the start of the phase 3 in vitiligo. And so we have in total 9 indications that we believe are suitable for these kind of melanocortins, 5 in skin, 4 in brain. Since these hormones are actually originating from our brain and skin, it's logic to follow the physiological path. And it comes in 3 formulations: implants, liquids, and topical. So the house became from a peptide focused to a house that expanded into new formulations and different diseases in skin and brain. Next. So let's look at the XP, the DNA repair trials, and upon your request, we have mapped out the entire timeline of what this program looks like. This is an ultra-rare disorder where patients are unable to repair UV damage of the skin, and that bears greater relevance for the general population, because if you are under extreme or the most extreme conditions able to assist repair of DNA, then you understand you can translate that knowledge and these data to general populations that are high risk of UV damage. And so in this ultra-rare disorder, we have less than 10,000 patients worldwide, and we believe that we can penetrate most of these markets, but that means that you also now have to go to Africa and Asia, such I will show you later. It's the highest unmet medical need because the prevalence of skin cancer in these patients is the highest that you can see on the planet. Now, the threshold to enter these patients, to enter the clinic for these patients, has been extremely high. As I said, in many years, the regulators and the ethical committees did not want drug companies to test and evaluate their products in these sick patients. So in total, there are 5 trials. Back, please. If you go back, please. You were a bit too fast. There are 5 trials leading to the regulatory dossier that you need to submit, both in Europe, US, and Africa, to get the regulatory approval for SNES for these patients. Now, significantly is that in these patients, we dose much higher and frequently than we've seen in EPP. Next. Now, for those that want to know the granular facts on these programs, what are we trying to achieve and demonstrate as the first in the world? So you're pioneering here, as you're trying to demonstrate that you can actually reduce photoproducts. The photoproducts is what we all incur, that is the chemical bonds that we don't want to have in our skin when you're exposed to sun. And these chemical bonds can lead to a high risk of skin cancer. So if you can show and demonstrate in these patients that you're actually able to affect these chemical bonds, you can make the statement that you reduce the risk of skin cancer by assist the DNA repair products in those exquisitely sensitive patients. And then we're looking at gamma H2AX and P53 biomarkers that indicate that you're actually protecting the skin and the skin of these patients against photo damage and skin cancer. And so the relevance for all of us who don't have diseases is massive, because this serves as a template for the first time to show that you can actually reduce the progression to skin cancer and photo damage. Next one, please. Under the heading of cutaneous porphyrias, we started our program 18 years ago in EPP, and I will not reiterate how that led to the current success, but it's logical that you look for diseases that are akin, that belong to the same family of porphyrias, genetic disorders, and the first one that we pursue is variegate porphyria. It is then questionable for the regulators, and that is the intensity of discussions, whether it is a totally new submission or whether it's actually part of the label expansion that we currently have for SCENESSE. So we have the readout anticipated in 24 on the 040 study that's ongoing in Zurich and Rotterdam. And here you see the timelines that eventually is going to lead to the EMA guidance in 24 and clarity of whether we can add variegate porphyria to our existing label or whether it's going to be a new label. So the total addressable market, as you have seen today, is something that we share for the first time, is 300 million for EPP in Europe and the US. Next. This is one of the most exciting programs because we understood a long time ago that these melanocortins are active on blood vessels. We call it vasoactive. And we looked then for the opportunities and which diseases in the world actually are affected by a compromised vascular system, and we ended up in ischemic stroke. So this is the second study that we run. It's called the 803 study, and that's a dose escalation study, but it's always escalating the severity of patients. So we started in 801 with 6 mild patients, where we were looking at the safety of this product. And I emphasize this, how important it is, because, God forbid, if you administer a new compound to patients who are hemodynamically unstable and a fatality or causality is proven between your drug and the medical condition of these patients, we all as shareholders have an issue in order to answer why we administer this drug. And as you know, the safety held up exceedingly well in 801, and that led us to the 803 study. And again, in a staged process, you then go from the moderate to the severe patients. And if you show that it's safe in mild, moderate, and severe, you now start to thinking about the positioning of the drug in these disorders. So I can share to you today that we've dosed our first severe, that is an NIHSS higher than 15 in stroke patients, and the patient is doing exceedingly well. And so the market cap of the total addressable market is 31 billion for all the strokes, 85% of those ischemic stroke. We believe that we can reach about 3 to 4% of those patients that need the treatment. Next one. Now, this is probably the program that attracts most attention in North America to this company, and that is the vitiligo study, or a study whereby you visibly see the patients losing pigmentation. And it took years to arrive at this point in time for good reasons, and I call that the fourth principle. And the fourth principle is working backwards. You can have effective drugs in your hand. You can believe that you can bring it to market, but the eternal tragedy occurs really when you know that the insurers or the healthcare providers are not willing to pay for the drug. And for 10 years, we had the conundrum that we understood that the drug was actually effective and safe. But there was no insurer willing in North America to pay for the drug because they regarded it as a cosmetic disease. Well, that changed in 21 and 22 when one of our competitors who have a topical product called ruxolitinib, and they launched it for the first time in July 22, where the insurers in the US reimbursed it at $21,000 per annum per patient, or about $2,200 per 60-gram tube. Now there is a precedent whereby vitiligo is no longer regarded as a cosmetic disorder, but as a disorder that has its own CPT listing and J-code. So what you see here, and it's highlighted and bordered in red, on the right-hand side you see actually the only competitor we have in systemic drugs, and that is Pfizer. And you need to split the Red Sea in two parts. On the left-hand side, you have the JAK inhibitors, those that use drugs that suppress the immune system. That is Pfizer and Incyte. Pfizer does it systemically, and Incyte does it topically. And then you have on the other side of the Red Sea, you've got us, those that try to repigment without affecting the immune system. And that is quite an exciting program, because you now start to differentiate the field. And this is the only company in the world now that has used as an endpoint, the primary objective, the total body pigmentation score, instead of the face. The face is relatively easy to repigment. The total body is a high threshold. And so you can see that Pfizer is using a facial VASI of 75%. 75% means the 75% improvement over baseline. And we're using 50% improvement over baseline. So that is a big departure from what the field did. And we, as you have seen through the announcements, we have formed a vitiligo panel that belong to the right side of the sea. These are believers in repigmentation therapies without affecting the immune system. So you've got two camps in the world. If you wanted to be precise, there are about 15 world experts in vitiligo. That is how small the field is. I'd say about 10 of them are believers in immune suppression. 5 of them are against immune suppression long term. And so we belong to that camp. So it is the most exciting program. But one part that I was amazed about that most of you have not picked up, which is a gradual progression to what we do, is we included patients of 12 years and older. So that is the first time that we actually introduce the drug to children, to adolescents. And so that also highlights how interconnected all our programs are. What you do in EPP affects vitiligo. What you do in vitiligo affects stroke. So by the fact that you're evaluating the drug into children, you also make the statement that the drug is safer for EPP and children in EPP. So there is a really beautiful interconnectedness between all our programs. So if you look at vitiligo, there are 7 steps that led to where we are. And I talked already about the insurers. But most importantly, by building a company that is vertically integrated, you're actually running the clinical trials for 77 million, which is a fraction of what Pfizer and larger companies are able to do. Now, since this is a visual disorder, there's the good and there's the bad. The bad is that you cannot blind these studies. So it's not a blinded study as you expect in phase 3. But the regulators know that and have accepted that. Because the moment you get the drug, you can see within a number of weeks whether the drug is effective or not. Now, this is the standard therapy. This is what every dermatologist in the world uses, narrowband UVB, but what you see is like a speckled aspect that doesn't really progress and doesn't really repigment these patients. This is the skin that is lost in pigmentation. If you use our drug with it, you see the confluence of these fields eventually coming up to the 90 to 95% repigmentation that we saw in the CUV 102 study. So if we replicate or able to replicate the same results of the CUV 102 studies, which were done in 56 patients, both in this one and the confirmatory 107, then we believe we have stand a better than reasonable chance of getting this drug to market for vitiligo. So this is exceedingly exciting. No, you're still too fast. And so what happens here is the total addressable market is about 500 million for North America. And the reason I stress North America is because that's the country where it's most prevalent in patients of skin color, African Americans, Hispanics, Eurasians, people of ethnic condition. And the penetration that we've modeled is 9%, the total addressable market the first 2 years. Now, for that to occur, we've taken the bold step, and again, going against the convention, because when we started with EPP, it was the same critique and the same questions we had is, are you able to distribute the drug yourself? And the answer was categorically yes. And so the task that Dr. Teng here in the room has with the team is to accredit and train 120 centers in the US, geographically distributed around the country, so that we can self-distribute the drug in vitiligo. And so that process has started. Right, and so why does a pharmaceutical company, in God's name, venture out to cosmetics? It is such an unusual step. And why do you have the courage or audacity to do it? That is the question that we ask. Well, first of all, I start with stating that since 1980, since this technology came out of the university lab, the connotation, the expectation of the markets is you, market participants in public markets, were waiting for the self-tanning solution. We fast forward, and you know that for 2.5 decades, it could not be done, it wasn't done. There is not a single day that we don't speak to investors, analysts, bankers, fund managers, where the word tanning is not mentioned. There is a demand for the self-tanning proposition. And it could not be done by injection because the regulatory threshold was so high, and the regulators do not want recreational drugs on the market for self-tanning purposes. So we sat down 10, 15 years ago and said, how are we going to deliver on that promise, on that expectation? And so I'm going to simplify it really in 3 colors. In EPP, we learned that you need to protect patients not only against UVB and UVA, with a strong demarcation at 400 nanometers wavelength, but that they also need protection in the blue and the green spectrum. And the blue and green spectrum, called HEV, is not a highlighted phenomenon in medical literature, or is not well recognized by medical professionals, but EPP taught us that these patients are exquisitely sensitive or intolerant to 408 nanometers wavelength. So we said, okay, if we understand how to do it by injection, we're going to reformulate our peptides into topical products. And so the first line, in order to understand how the market would react in pilot studies, was a polychromatic protected. And that's an expensive word for protection against the entire wavelength of the electromagnetic spectrum. So hence the word polychromatic. It's the UVB, UVA, the blue and the green light. And so our first CSL products are protecting against that spectrum. And for whom? For those that are under extreme conditions. Those that have immune suppressive therapies, that have a sensitivity to sun and solar exposure, those that have a history of family history of skin cancer, and those that spend a lot of time outdoors or near reflective surfaces. Sailors, professional sporters, farmers, construction builders. So that is our target market for you. What we learned in XP is that we can reduce the photoproducts, and these photoproducts are the first step to reduce photo damage, and that is a step to reduce squamous cell and basal cell carcinoma, in other words, skin cancers. So the DNA repair in the photocosmetics has a direct, what I call umbilical cord to the XP program. What you generate in data and confidence on the markets in your medical program is translated to your cosmetic programs. And last but not least, if you're able, with your peptides, in 1 or 2 formulations, to bring back the color, the pigmentation of these patients, of course you need to use these peptides as a topical, a transdermal formulation, in order to maintain the stabilized pigmentation in those people who need it. and that is the ultimate self-tanning promise that everyone wanted. So then the question of the markets was, well, if you're starting a cosmetic venture within the pharmaceutical company, is it not better to divest it and to make this on its own? Yes, you can, but then you become an ordinary cosmetic company without that suite of data and confidence that you've built up over 2 or 3 decades. So hence the targeted technology translation. Next one. So we created, and we, that is really Mrs. Bibiloni, who comes from the luxury market. She created a new segment under cosmetics that is called photocosmetics. We trademarked it. It doesn't exist yet. And the name of the game here is to attract visibility. You need to create audiences before your products even come to market. And we do that in a number of events globally, the launch events, but the majority is going to be online, the digital platforms that we use. And so I'm going to mention one specific term. It's called targeted digital marketing. That is the use of specific databases targeting those patients that have common concerns, that share the same traits and characteristics, but in essence need these products. So it's raising the awareness of need before you introduce these products. And we are in the stage 1 where we have run our pilot studies on CSL and where we precede the commercial launch of CSL in 2024. This is the first product range, and this is the second product range, which is a more aesthetic range, which has reflective properties. Yes. So a number of questions were raised on our investor relations program, and I answer that by this slide deck. Is the company focused on all stakeholders in the markets? And the answer, again, is categorically yes. The programs that we run consist of 3 components. You got the non-deal roadshows organized by the banks, the brokers, by the analyst houses that cover us. And there are a number of those organized year on year in Australia, in Asia, in Europe, in the US. And that's a carousel of activities. Then there is the direct, the face-to-face institutional and analyst meetings that are conducted by our head of IR, Mr. Malcolm Bull, by our CFO, by myself, by the chairman. And so we have these kind of analyst contacts. In 2022, there were about 131. In 23, we increased dramatically, and 24, the calendar is totally full. And then there are the bespoke events that we organize in the world, luncheons, dinners, for family offices, for existing investors, for new investors, and that is born out of demand. And it's also going back to the roots of this company, because in 2005, when there was no money, where the company was actually running out of money, we had the exotic idea of organizing these events in 5 cities in the world without having the certainty that we could actually resurrect the company. And that actually led to the subscription to the CLINUVEL shares in 2006. So we went back to the roots. So there was a 3-pronged strategy. In terms of the IR team, there's one in Australia, one in Europe, and we're hiring an IR manager in the US. So that will be a team of 3 covering all markets. Now, my chagrin lies into the asymmetry in the markets, and that is painful because I want everyone to have equal information at the same time. But such is not the case in capital markets. And so we have 4 houses that cover us, sell-side analysts who do that independently without us influencing or paying them. And it's their prerogative to distribute their reports to their clients, their subscribing clients. And so we understand that our shareholders do not have access to these reports. And so we talked a long time with them whether there's a way around it, and the answer is legal and compliance says no. The only thing we can share with you is the range of target prices which are far above our current trading. And I don't make compliments easily, but this is really the work of Malcolm Bull, who started in January 19 with no analyst coverage and who single-handedly managed to erect this kind of pattern. So all hats off to you, Malcolm. Next one. Now, if you look at the registry, and there was a question posed out of Europe, is does CLINUVEL attract institutions? Well, CLINUVEL does attract institutions because 14% over the last 2 years have bought on market of issued capital. So the 14% of Australian institutions have bought into the company, and we haven't seen that before. That is without rights issue, without placement. And some of these analysts that are here today are responsible for attracting the clients into the stock. Next one. So this is, of course, a difficult pill to swallow for both you and I as shareholder. And so what you see is a total increase of revenues over the years, an increase in net profit after tax, and a decrease in share price. And so, you know, both as a shareholder, as an MD, you ask, you know, what are we doing wrong? Is there something that we can improve, or do we need to simply look in the mirror and say, well, there's a fundamental flaw in running this company? So we run to our analysts internally, externally, and say, now, what is going on here? And this is credit to Bell Potter, who is here in the room today. And we look at the median price-earnings ratio on the various companies in Australia and how they're trading over the last 12 months. Then we look at the number of biopharmaceutical companies in the US, large and mid-cap, and then you come to the conclusion that CLINUVEL, although it is less, in my view, tremendous amount of market cap and value, is trading at around 20 to 23, and that our peers are suffering the same fate at the moment. Next one. So the question, first a rhetorical question, but then also the questions from you is, what will it look like? Is it worth waiting for after all this time and the tedious progress that the company makes? And why this risk aversion? Let's continue. So the house, and that's what I say to most of our staff when we talk about what we're building, the house on all fronts is in scaffolds. We're building everywhere. But what will it look like? And there I take more an external view. Suppose I was a consultant to this company, I was not intimately involved. What would you do with this house? Well, I would fortify and increase the porphyria rooms. I definitely would gamble and roll the dice on vitiligo because you can see that it works. XP no one has ever endeavored, but it's so much akin to porphyria, and if you can actually show that you reduce photoproducts consistently, you've got, in my view, a real route to market. ACTH is a no-brainer. If you are specialized in melanocortins, you need to have the mother molecule that is generically available and that we will formulate as a branded product. The stroke market is a difficult one because not many therapies are available. So that is the opportunity in order to make an innovative avenue into that market. And last but not least, if you don't answer the questions that you've had for 40 years in delivering melanocortins as a transdermal product, I think the opportunity would be lost and someone else would do it. When you aggregate all this, you come to a total addressable market of dozens of billions. But most people tell you that there's dozens of billions of opportunities. We realistically look at a penetration of 4 to 5%. That is what you can do as a company. The $2 billion market address is sufficient, I believe. And that will be complemented with an M&A arm. So we're actively looking for those merger and acquisitions that are synergistic or that make sense or that they somehow would fortify this house. And the question is, well, does that not jeopardize everything you do? Well, M&A comes in three forms. We have three baskets that we're constantly looking at. Is manufacturing, is revenues, or R&D. R&D that makes sense, that would fortify what we do and the skill set that we have. Manufacturing, because we want to have the last piece of the jig puzzle in-house, which is self-sufficiency, being able to manufacture yourself, and revenues in order to bolster your revenue streams. So in summary, what have we discussed today? There are 16 catalysts over the next 12 months. The fiscal management that was led by Darren and his team has led to a cash reserve of $156 million. This morning I woke up and I played the what-if scenarios on my computer, and I said to myself, what if we had stood here today in the current economic climate with $10 million in cash, having diversified early on, not de-risk the business? What would we have said to you in terms of the ability to raise capital or to attract more funding to complete the house? Australian institutions have increased their stake in the company at 14%. There is a hybrid company that is emerging, both pharma and photocosmetics, and it makes perfectly sense why you should do it. The pipeline is pretty rich, and the commercial launches of all these products are sequentially, whereby the marketing budget is increasing from 24 to 26. The analyst target prices range from $22 to $50, and the total addressable markets that we think is realistic is around $2 billion. And that takes me to the following, to give you a flavor of how it is to balance finance and actually doing good for medical science, finding medical solutions. For you and those of you that have a weak stomach, I ask you for 2 minutes to walk away, to look away. For you that are interested in what we do across the world, this will be pretty revealing. Next one, please. The objective in the first trial in vitiligo is to accelerate, speed up the process of repigmentation, and to achieve repigmentation on places such as the hands and the legs, which are almost therapy resistant to narrowband UVB. We never understood the mechanism of why pigmentation disappears gradually. And in drug development, you need to have a rationale, you need to have a scientific hypothesis before you start shooting and targeting patients with the drug. Right. It's not a trial and error process. You need to understand the why question. Why is it that these patients gradually lose their pigmentation? Based on the results that we see here in the US, based on the patients that we've seen, and that is also a landmark event when you start seeing these patients in the clinic together with the physicians and you get the immediate feedback. Hope is probably a justified word.
Skin that does not produce melanin, which means there's no biological barrier that stops the UVA and UVB from striking the skin cells and making them mutate into cancer cells. So that is what happens basically to a person with albinism. My parents knew about my albinism when I was a very little boy, around 6-9 months, according to my dad. So they raised me in a way that once you're a person with albinism, you should keep yourself away from the sun. So I was growing in a mentality in a way that the sun is my biggest enemy. Biologically, albinism comes with two main complications. First is low vision, and second is sunburns that, if are recurrent, may lead to skin cancer. And socially, albinism might cause stigmatization, discrimination to the victim.
Jina naitwa Dr. Said Hamis Ali, ni daktari bingwa wa magonjwa ya ngozi na tupo katika hospitali kuu ya Mnazi Mmoja ambapo tunaona wagonjwa mbalimbali wenye matatizo ya ngozi pamoja na clinic maalum za watu wenye ualbino pamoja na XP, Xeroderma pigmentosa. Kwa hivyo baada ya kuanzisha kliniki hii, moja ya kazi ilikuwa ni kuweza kuwatafuta na kuwatambua na pia kuwapa elimu ili kuweza kujua kuhusiana na hali yao, namna ya kuishi, namna ya kujikinga, pamoja na kuwapa uelewa na elimu watu wanaoishi nao na jamii zinazowazunguka.
Wanajenga tamaa kama zile za kuwa mtu kufanywa mambo ya uchawi. Kuna wengine wanajenga hivyo kwamba mimi nimerogwa ndio maana nikaa hivi, ila wanaambia kwamba ile sio kurogwa. Kuna chembe fulani zinakuwa haziwezi kurudisha ile hali. Kama umepigwa na jua sana, ukabadilika ngozi, kama vile umekuwa mweusi, baadaye ngozi yako ikajirudi, zile zinakuwa sie kidogo, kwetu sie inakuwa hamna. Kwa hiyo nawaomba kwamba wajue kuwa ni kitu cha kawaida tu. Tupo kama watu wengine, sema tunatofautiana hiyo kwenye ngozi tu.
Good. I'll round off. There's a lot that's been proposed and presented to you today. You can read it in your own time at home. It's been lodged in the ASX. And thank you for your attention. I'm sure there are some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wolgen. I now invite to the stage Dr. Shane Story and Dr. Melissa Benson of Wilson's Advisory to join Dr. Wolgen, Mr. Blydorp and myself. Now, while the chairs are being set up, I'll just give you some background information. Wilson's Advisory commenced research coverage of CLINUVEL in April 2021. We appreciate they have told their clients of our progress towards a diversified pharmaceutical group and have provided valuable insights into our vitiligo program and ACTH product development. The healthcare analyst team at Wilson's is led by Dr. Shane Story, who has covered the healthcare sector with distinction for more than a decade. Dr. Melissa Benson is Wilson's lead analyst on CLINUVEL. She has been with Wilson since September 2020 and is supported today by Ms. Madeline Williams, who has been with Wilson since November 2021. Please note that Dr. Benson, Dr. Story and Ms. Williams are asking the questions of shareholders today as independent analysts of CLINUVEL and have agreed to do so as part of their commitment to communicate CLINUVEL's story to the broader market. So welcome, Dr. Benson and Dr. Story. Now, we'll have Dr. Benson and Dr. Story asking the questions, and I, as the chair, will nominate the person who will answer the question.
Yeah, I think.
Does it work?
Mine works.
I think that's working. Yes.
Do I need one?
I asked you to use that.
I don't know if they can hear you. I think that is working.
Good. Fire away.
So perhaps if we start with, well, might seem like a simple question, but it's a complicated answer. I mean, if you think about the core of CLINUVEL, I mean, when shareholders are asking about what is your focus and what is your core strategy, how would you address that?
Well, I think that our managing director has really answered that question, but in his address. But perhaps I'll just hand that to Philippe to summarise that into an answer for this question.
Maybe I do. So I think after 2 decades, it's clear that the way we see drug development is slightly different than our peers. I keep hearing it, so I probably have to admit to it. But when we have our meetings, we talk about opportunities not only as clinical opportunities, but what is commercially viable. And I've seen on the other side many tragedies of companies that had actually very effective drugs but couldn't get the reimbursement for it. And so you then have a very short-lived elation of coming to the market, only to find out later that no one's willing to pay for it, or where you have to pay hefty rebates or out-license the products. And then the economic viability is not justified. And so we start that whole process early on. It may even be, for instance, in solar urticaria. We have a product that really works well in these patients. But if the insurers tell you that they want to reimburse it at the price level of an antihistamine, you can make the shareholders really happy by promising that you're going to get the drug to market, but you already know that you won't be able to compete on the price. And so I think, to answer your question, the core business or approach of CLINUVEL is to understand early on through primary market research, is this economically feasible? And then look at the technology. Otherwise, you're believing in your own scientific dream. And I think we're not bad at that. We could be better, but we're not bad.
And so, I mean, if we look at your core business of SCENESSE, you've obviously done that, and that's deriving and gaining your cash reserves that you have. And you touched on, synergistic M&A being important. But I know there's a lot of shareholder questions around other ways in which you might use that capital. Obviously, R&D expense is something, but, are things such as buyback programs or an increased dividend, is that part of the discussion?
I might hand that one to Dr. Wolgen as well, please.
The thinking of a board and management is in flux. What is valid for one day can change the other. A share buyback program in the context of time could be a reasonable use to redistribute wealth to shareholders. But there are a number of factors that you also need to, and that we are privy to. If you sit across German and the Swiss insurers, and don't take your opponents for fools. They're educated, they learn it, they're getting better at it. And various companies come from at the table for the same negotiations, for the same allocation of funds. If these insurers tell you already, the moment as pharmaceutical companies start buyback programs, we already know that there's an excess of funds and cash, we will renegotiate with you the deal. Well, I'm very sensitive to that. I don't want a renegotiation, and our teams that negotiate don't do that. So you gain on one hand for your shareholders and for us by engaging in the share buyback program, but you lose on the other hand because you will be penalized by those that matter and that those that... So it's not as simple as determining on one day that you need to do it, but there's a clearly what I call a floor on the value of this company. If this goes lower than what we deem as reasonable, yeah, then you have to consider a share buyback program with the funds. But primarily, I mean, it's our belief that the remit of a pharmaceutical company is to reinvest its funds to find medical solutions. Now, another factor which I think matters to all shareholders, the press is not eager on share buyback programs because it's seen as bolstering the profitability and the benefits of executives and managers. So you need to be sensitive to all aspects. And then when you come to that deliberation, it may be that one day the pendulum swings towards, well, it's now time to add share buybacks to your dividends. Sure.
That's helpful context.
My pleasure to see you here.
As I said in my address, the board is undergoing a process of renewal and probably expansion, and we need to look to the future of our CEO and CFO as well. There are going to be a lot of changes over the next few years, potentially. And the board is looking at all this very seriously at the moment in view of all the things that are happening on those slides. There needs to be continuity to provide the end result that we all want to see, but at the same time changes happen, as we've seen today, and the board needs to act on the changes at hand, but still maintain the stability. And I think this board is very experienced at doing that. We've had a very stable board for many years, and we believe that although there are these changes today, that this stability will continue into the future. I hope that answers your question.
And so maybe then if I can ask one more about the management team, and I think sometimes shareholders may be of the opinion that, you know, it can be a bit of a one-man band to outside shareholders. So perhaps if you could kind of speak to us, I guess, around the management team that you have supporting you, but also, I guess, succession planning, because we know that, you know, your contract, Dr. Wolgen, is coming up for potential renewal or ending in 2025.
Well, the Remuneration Committee is discussing an extension of term for Dr. Wolgen, no final decision has been made. We have contacted analysts, proxy advisors and shareholders to gauge whether they would want the CEO to continue or not. and the unanimous view was for Dr. Wolgen to continue and complete the company's objectives. Now, exactly what that time frame is remains to be determined, but the board would wish Dr. Wolgen to continue and see the completion of these objectives. As a board, we also have the obligation to continue to work to identify potential CEO candidates. So whilst Dr. Wolgen remains the MD, it's the board responsibility to plan for succession, and that's what we will be doing. We will plan for succession in time. Thank you.
Just picking up on Melissa's phrase there about the one-man bandism, which we do see often in our space. I wonder whether you've given a lot of thought or any thought to making some of the very talented people who are in the next sort of row below CEO more visible, not all the time, but perhaps once a year. Have you given any thought to that as a board as we look ahead?
Well, I don't believe it is a one-man band at all.
Oh no, not suggesting that.
I will ask our managing director to comment on the management team that he supervises and leads. Philippe?
It's wholly unfair. The only thing you can say is I was there at the beginning when the turnaround took place, but you've got a management team of 9. These people have been professionals, have been there for 16 years. They've come to blossom. It's probably the most exhilarating part of the company to see managers. And 16 years is a third of their career in one company, and I think that's exemplary for what we do. The next shift has a median tenure of 5.5 years. So we're trying to build an academy where we train and send them to courses and then choose them to stay. And so I'm the conductor, but I don't play the music, and nor do I know the music sheet. They are truly driving the company. Probably I'm the only responsible for giving the rhythm, but no, it is a truly a collective effort. The CSO, the CFO have been there all their life, their career. So to characterize as a one-man band is really shortchanging them. My fun, enthusiasm comes from seeing how the talent is actually able to solve problems every day, and that's really my task. But they are doing it.
So there's obviously many shareholder questions also around the share price, and you touched on this in your presentation. I mean, we know, covering many different pharmaceutical and biotech companies, you're not alone. I mean, maybe I would put it this way: do you think there's anything you could have done in, say, the past 12 months to 3 years differently that you think was in your control versus not?
Again, I might hand that one to Dr. Wolgen as well, if I may.
Of course you can do things differently. There are so many ways of looking at the problem, but by and large you need to appreciate that certainly in our industry you've got many choices to invest in life science companies. We belong to a rare species of 3% in Australia that's profitable and 9% on NASDAQ. When you go to large institutions in the US, it's not uncommon to hear, we never see a profitable biotech. And so you then have to explain why you're doing it. The norm is to engage in serial capital raisings. I believe it's bad for shareholders because you've got this perpetual dilution that has no ending. But that is not the norm in our industry. The norm in the industry is that when you engage in this, you also attract the institutions at steep discount. So you gain on one hand, but you lose on the other, because if you don't do your rights issues and private placements at 20-30% discount, you're also not going to get those larger blocks in. So yeah, maybe we will change that strategy at some point, but we didn't need to. So I do not believe that the current share price is owing to us putting a foot or step wrong. It's made the entire market is down. But at the same time, you also have a relatively low liquidity, whereby you take one or two shareholders, and I think you're familiar with that phenomenon in our stock, that appreciates the stock 20-30% over a month. And so I'm not so concerned about share price. It's only relevant if you need to liquidate and materialize your paper losses. But if it's not, then we've been there before. So it's always dark before dawn, you know.
And let's not underestimate the impact of interest rates on growth company valuations, which fairly hard at the moment and have been for some time.
So perhaps we'll pivot to just a few questions around SCENESSE for EPP. And there have been some shareholder questions, around SCENESSE, particularly its availability here in Australia. So, it's been approved by the TGA, but it's still not, broadly available to patients here in Australia. So any thoughts on how or when that may change?
Dr. Wolgen?
Yeah, so the discussion with PBS, the Pharmacy Benefit Scheme, is ongoing. It's quite clear that there will be pressure on the price in Australia. Australia uses what is called a quality system, very much following NICE, the UK. And so our teams are negotiating until we get it right. But we see no reason to give steep discounts on the price for this drug. Yeah.
Could you comment maybe on the competitive landscape? I mean, I know that there's been a particular one program from Mitsubishi Tanabe that's been sort of in the price, I'd say, for maybe 2 years or more by now. But maybe any updated thoughts on that situation, and after that, then I might also have my own question on pricing. Thanks.
Dr. Wolgen?
I had the same question 3 years ago in an AGM on a Japanese-American company and whether it would erode our market. And I'm not quite sure what I said, but it was somewhere along the trend of it's to be seen whether it comes to market. And so our teams go back to basics. And the first one is a drug needs to have a receptor in order to be effective. In November 21, the same company that competes with us issued a paper authored by Suzuki, and they compared like for like SCENESSE to the MTT compound. It was shown, and we didn't publish it, they did, that SCENESSE had 8,000 times more binding affinity to the receptors that we target than their compound. It was also shown that the EC50, the 50% maximum efficacy that you need to achieve, that was in a magnitude of 140 times less effective than SCENESSE. So if you read these data that are produced by your counterpart, you understand that you will need to dose very high, very frequent, certainly if it's an oral product, and the bioavailability means the amount of drug that ends up in systemic circulation after swallowing a pill is pretty low. So what is public, and so without giving away the trade secrets, is they engaged in the phase 3 trial at 300 milligrams. They discovered that it was too high, and most likely it caused treatment adverse reactions. They lowered to 100 milligram in the phase 3 trial, and in the follow-on trial, they had to increase it to 200 milligram. Now, we're not privy to how other companies run their programs, but we know for one thing in our regulatory team is that if you start changing the dose in the phase 3, it's no longer pivotal. So there are clearly issues. But it's difficult for analysts and market participants to understand. But we've not really been concerned about the competitor on the horizon. And it's going to take a number of years if they make it to the market. And in the meantime, the market is still underpenetrated. So it's a discussion that has gone on for a long time, but we're sitting here in 2023, and there is no competitor on the horizon at the moment. So.
My question on pricing was, having observed CLINUVEL over many years now, with, I guess, an approach and a uniform sort of pricing, sort of almost philosophy. You know, many other companies in your position may have capitulated on pricing, sort of in temptation to sort of chase not immaterial markets. My question is, that philosophical approach to pricing, should we expect, I know it's a question without notice, but you invited me, so, but is that a philosophy that we're to expect to see CLINUVEL apply for subsequent sort of products as we contemplate other launches?
Dr. Walgett.
Right. It's interesting that you characterize it as philosophy.
It feels philosophical.
Okay. Right. Well, okay. If it feels like philosophy, then I'd say that the thinking was born out of the inequality in the market. And so what happened was, we understood that patients, physicians, and insurers were talking cross-border. And I'll give you an example. We understood from the Swiss that they were talking to Swiss and to German insurers. We also understand that if the pool of primary carers is small, then of course they're going to exchange information on pricing and terms and conditions. So I go as far as saying there is a philosophy in that I believe that you need to be fair in life. And you cannot treat or maltreat hospitals and prescribers in a different way if they're living next door, adjacent to each other in two countries. Yes, we are aware in our marketing and pricing team that it's probably deviating from the norm, but it certainly has worked because a number of insurers say, well, we've never seen companies like this. We applaud that. Whether you can maintain it for a long time, that's to be seen. But at the same time, we have been exposed, and Mr. Hayes is one of the better negotiators in our team. We've been exposed to discussions with payors where the rebates are not mild. They need to be signed under confidentiality agreement in what they call a room under 8 eyes. I'd never heard that expression until we did it. And you see yourself giving away 90% of your drug price. The question is, based on what? On what science? And most of the times it's a spur of the moment. There is no science or analysis behind it. And so if you are the first to market and you more or less monopolize a domain, a field, a treatment, there is no reason to start lowering your prices. But at the same time, the onus is on us to find a price that is commensurate to the disease and the problem you try to solve. And I think we've reached that both in Europe and the US.
Thank you.
So a question on new product development. This is a program that's of particular interest to me, the ACTH or the Neuracthor product. So what is kind of the path to bring that to market, and And importantly, what are the kind of timelines we should think about for that particular new product?
Is that for you?
For you. I mean, I can comment on Neuracthel in the sense that it's a drug already in existence. There are other companies who market it and sell it, and practitioners who prescribe it. So we're in competition with these other companies. But the advantage we have is that this is the melanocortin family. We have a lot of expertise with the pharmacology of this hormone, and we are able to also change the formulation of ACTH as well because of our expertise in manufacturing different formulations of all the drugs you've seen. We have that capacity with Neuracthel as well, and we believe that introducing another variety of this drug will complement the market and allow a greater choice for the market, not only of our drug, but its different formulations, which will be different to what's already on the market. And this drug is used in serious problems like infantile seizures and multiple sclerosis, amongst other things. It basically promotes cortisol production in the body, so it increases steroid. So it's in fact a steroid treatment. But it's the central hormone that controls steroid, the cortisol family of steroids. So it has quite a wide application already, but this will, allow the market to understand the advantages of perhaps our product over other companies. Do you have anything to add to that, Philippe?
An opportunity is defined in a number of ways. It's a dynamic evaluation of whether you should go into the market or not. It's a number of years where you have the discussion internally. What happened, and that's known to some of the shareholders, is the leader in the market has been Mallinckrodt. And Mallinckrodt is a company that spun off out of Questcor and found an opportunity to use a compound, a hormone, that did not go through the FDA approval process, but came on the market prior to 1952, and they increased the price from a few dollars to $42,000 per injection, and Mallinckrodt came to the fore. Then they run into congressional problems because they need to justify the price hikes. Were involved in the opioid scandal, and Mallinckrodt filed for Chapter 11 in September 22. And what happened there was the manufacturers that were providing ACTH had an exclusive agreement from Mallinckrodt. And when you speak to our regulatory team, our thinking is, well, you can go into generics, branded generics, on the provision that you can actually own a DMF, a drug master file. If you own a drug master file, now you have a different proposition because you more or less shield the competitors to come in for the same dossier. And the drug master file is obligatory in order to file a successful ANDA, and ANDA is an abbreviated new drug application. And so when that opportunity opened up on the manufacturing side, they said, well, we'll be mad not to do it, to seize it. So we already understood that it belongs to the family of melanocortins, but you also need to be able to shield your manufacturing, the front end of the value chain, and that's how it came about. So, and the timelines are 2 to 3 years in order to get this to market. As the generic, and then in-house, we're trying to formulate it such that it becomes a branded product.
And just to follow up on that, where you spoke around that new formulation really being quite unique to the market, I mean, should we think about that as an opportunity to expand the existing ACTH market beyond what the current formulations can do?
Yeah, we're now on a very thin ice, so the answer is yes.
can I talk about the new range of products which are targeting completely new markets with your bronzing and other ideas. I see FY23 as the year where you made your first sort of exploratory experiments in those markets, and I'm keen to learn the lessons that you learned early and then how you think about how you'll take the launches forward this year.
Dr. Walgan.
Well, it's good to hear the question from you because
I'm old enough to remember the first parts of it.
Yeah, young enough. But what happened was, and this is for the audience, when we first spoke a couple of years ago, and that's a prerogative of analysts, and you better listen to your analysts because they are the gatekeeper, they are the super influencers to the market. The answer was a lackluster no. Why would CLINUVEL go into these markets? And it's a market you don't understand, and so forth. But I don't know what happened to you over COVID, where you slowly converted and understood the rationale of doing it. There is a myriad of patents that were filed by cosmetic houses since 1990. Literally every cosmetic house on the globe filed for patents for melanocortins to be used as tanning products. And none of these houses have prolonged and progressed their development. The best way to explain it, it's not their remit. A cosmetic company does not want to be in the pigment business. By and large, they want to see translucent porcelain skin in teenagers. In the context of time, when we first started 20 years ago, the connotation of increasing pigmentation, freckles, nevi, was regarded as touch and go, and maybe that's not such a good thing. So there was a real healthcare risk associated by the markets, by those that hadn't used it. So the cosmetic houses said, no, we're not going to touch this. So they all abandoned these patents. These patents are expired. But if you create all these safety data over decades, and you understand the benefit of these melanocortins, there is really a homeostatic balance. You rebalance these patients centrally and with their skin disorders. There's a good reason why you should go into that business. So in 23, we learned from the digital pilots the response and the content that would resonate with our target markets. And so it's not sufficient to build your databases. You also need to replenish it with relevant content, otherwise people switch off. So in digital jargon, impressions is not enough. The impressions is really the views, but the view could be 1 second or 5 seconds. What you want is people to stay on the iPhone or laptop for at least 30 seconds, so that's our cutoff. And then you want repeat viewers. And so we learned our digital metrics in order to arrive at click-through rates and conversion in order to build these databases. And that's a whole new business. For that, we established a CBM team, a communication, branding, and marketing team, with professionals from IT, digital know-how, LVMH, luxury industry, which is not typically what you would expect in a pharmaceutical company. But in order to make a chance, or to have a chance of making it to market, you need to have a whole new division of people think differently and have been educated differently. So I think we understand now well what content resonates with these 3 target groups. And that's the path forward to launch CSL, regular and radiant.
It seems that you're determined now to sort of build that internally and organically.
Yeah.
But prior to making that decision, did you have a quick look as to see whether there were marketing organisations or other things that you might have looked at from a M&A perspective even,
Yeah.
and then finally decided to do it yourself?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually, very relevant. Of course, so when we started this foray into cosmetics in 2018, we went to a number of marketing agencies and had a number of questions of how to enter the market and how to be successful, competitive. And to our surprise, when we gave them the mandate, they all came back and said, well, we've never built a market before the products arrive. So establishing a market before the products arrive, we don't know how to. There is no template for that. And the second answer that we got was, we haven't worked with pharmaceuticals that go into cosmetics. So we understood what we're doing is novel. And at some point we said, okay, we will, instead of spending these millions of dollars in marketing agencies, it's better to spend it in-house and build a team.
Jeffrey, time's getting by. Perhaps we open questions from the floor. We're just
Sure. We did have a few more questions to go, but we'll open it to the floor now because we've now been going 2 hours, and we did want to give the floor a chance to shareholders a chance to ask questions directly. So remember your yellow cards and identifying yourselves. Do we have any questions from the floor? Yes, sir.
Thanks. My name is Barry Telford. The question, for quite a while, and even in the annual report, you've been talking about all this extra expenditure you're going to incur over the next few years. And I think in the annual report, you've got about 80 million to go over the next 2 years. When are you going to start telling us, please, about what sort of revenue and profit you are expecting to generate from that expenditure? Because it'd be good to know as a shareholder, but I would have also thought from a performance measurement, internally, people like your remuneration committee should have targets like that.
Well, it's a very good question, but you'll see the timelines that Dr. Wolgen placed on the slides, and it takes those timelines to achieve the results of the trials. For instance, the vitiligo, that will if that trial is successful, that will generate income, but we can't say that that's happening right now. We have to wait for it. So in other words, we're asking for patience based on the presentation to you to show what's in the pipeline, what's looking very promising, and what will add value to the company in the future, we believe. So we can't say that income, we can't plan for that income directly right now, but Philippe has given you the figures on what it's likely to generate, and on that basis you have to make a judgment. Philippe, would you like to add to that?
I think the gentleman also alludes to the fact is whether the company is giving guidance on future earnings. Is that correct?
And it's all going to go on clinical trials and developing products. It would help to know that. It would help to know what the components of the expenditure are going to be. Because yes, of course, if it's going into clinical trials, one has to wait for the outcome of clinical trials. But it actually hasn't ever said that anywhere that I could see.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, the expend components are clearly going to be allocated to our R&D programs. I mean, that is the main core of our business. A component will also go to the marketing of the photocosmetics. But we stated in 2021 that we would spend 175 million over 5 years, and we're now on track in order to drive this company forward. But there are components as marketing, R&D, innovation, drug discovery, formulation development. And with these projected expenditures, you're still able to increase your cash reserve. So we are ahead of our own projections.
Thanks. John Cunning is my name. It's a comment more than a question, I think. Just on your pharmaceutical or cosmeceutical products, the cosmetic products, and forgetting about the end part of tanning, but more protection and repair, the Australian market is crying out for something in this area. Where light-skinned, there's a lot of light-skinned people and a lot of UV exposure and a lot of skin damage, as you clearly know. But there's, you know, I don't know when we're likely to see something that's over the counter or, you know, a cosmetic product that fits into this category. Forgetting about tanning, which, you know, is further down the track. I just wonder, you know, when we might see something.
Dr. Walgan.
Yeah, so we've estimated the solar care market that you're talking about, the photoprotective market, north of 5 billion per annum in the Western world, as Europe and the US. And so the market research says that. There are a great number of players, as you know, that promote and distribute their solar care products. They're all UVA and UVB protectors, up to SPF 100. You can and don't want to compete in that segment of the market, because that is competing for shelf space. So we addressing different markets where the large cosmetic houses are not interested in promoting and distributing these drugs, and these are the three groups I mentioned. As a general comment to you is, I believe there is a high need for super protective products for ultra-sensitive individuals and skin. And so that is the mission that we try to fulfill. I don't know if that fully answers, but that is actually what we're trying to do.
And note that your question was around the Australian market, but remember, we're talking global here. We're talking global, well beyond Australia. So perhaps I think that answers the question. We'll move on to the next one. Please, sir.
Andrew Dixon. Two quick questions. One was I asked last year at the AGM in almost this very seat. Does CLINUVEL have in their hot little hands a lotion containing melanocortin molecule which can penetrate the skin and has proven to tan the skin? Yeah, and it's just yes or no.
The answer is I am not allowed to tell you because it's not been disclosed to the market, so there is no yes or no.
All right, fine. Next question. I was at my dermatologist the other week and getting a few things zapped off, and I was reflecting, chatting with Dr. Wayne Millen over 23 years ago, and he started to develop the implant for the which is now SNES. My dermatologist doesn't know about it. Bit similar to your question about Australia. When we're in Australia, can we have something to help out? I mean, I'm going to get cancer, and I don't, you know, if I have to wait another 20 years for a generic version, it's probably too late. When can I expect something?
So, you know, you are an example of the micro demand that we see everywhere. So we're aware of it. But there is a sobering thought here that I need to tell you, is when you refer to Dr. Wayne Millen and the start, and you go back in time, most dermatologists were petrified in using melanocortins because the association was with the aggravation of nevi, aggravation of freckles, the uncertainty whether it would have an effect on melanoma. I personally believe, and I can tell you that a fact, this drug is being trialed at the moment in animals as an anti-melanoma agent. It takes 2 to 4 decades to convert a medical community, because if the perception is rife that melanocortins are dangerous, then the demand that you and I have for these products are in vain, because you will not get it through the market. So the answer is, within your and my lifetime, they will need to come to market through us. These lotions will contain peptides along the lines that I've shown you, the active ingredients, and they will be made available, in my view, online, over the counter, without prescription. Yes. So I will see you next year.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that.
I'm Simon Bown. In your process to expand and refresh the board, could you tell us a little bit about what skills and knowledge bases you're looking to enhance or introduce?
Thank you. Look, all boards need to be well balanced with a skills set, a skills matrix. And we have a wide range of skills on our board, which ranges from scientific expertise to business expertise and entrepreneurial expertise. Because we're entering the photocosmetic area, which is a different type of business, we may need to attract a board member who has expertise in that particular area of marketing and business. We probably don't have that on the board, that person on the board at the moment. Of course, there are generic skills that come with being selected as a board member, and these relate to knowledge on, the usual things of governance and the way the board operates, and the culture of the board. We have to take all these things into account when we're judging whether someone should join our board. We obviously want compatibility, we want leadership, we want imagination to tell us new directions to think about going in, but fundamentally we need people that understand the business, understand the economics of running this company, and understand that we're here to serve the shareholders as well as, of course, the patients, but keeping the shareholders in mind. And I think if we all have that philosophy, we'll have a very strong board. But I hope that sort of answers your question. Thank you. I don't think there are... perhaps we have one last question because we're now over time. I think most people have asked the questions that they wanted to ask. Sir?
Yes, Adam Pikitko again. Several weeks ago there was an article in a Mallorcan newspaper. It mentioned something about a potential clinic being open. It was pretty hard to interpret because I think it was translated from another, or the version I saw was translated from another language. So I was just hoping you could expand a little bit about any plans to open such a clinic.
Dr. Walken?
You're talking about, you called it a newspaper? Well, my Spanish is non-existent, so I gave interviews in Mallorca, and I was quite amused to see that CLINUVEL is opening 30 clinics in Mallorca. Unless you know a reason to, I don't. But no, I don't read the tabloids. Mallorca is a hub where a number of investors have supported the company for 2 decades, so we gave a presentation, but I've got no idea what they translated in Spanish. My Spanish is non-existent, but I am going to learn it now. But no, we're not opening clinics in Mallorca.
We're not opening clinics in Mallorca. Let that finish question time. Thank you to Dr. Benson and Dr. Story for your time today and facilitating the discussion, which I thought was very interesting and productive, if I might say so myself. Since there are no further questions, all items of business have now been addressed. The final poll results will be verified and released to the Australian Securities Exchange after this meeting and no later than opening of the market tomorrow. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your attendance and I hope for a successful 2024 and beyond for all of us and for CLINUVEL, of course. I now invite the room to join us for refreshments outside. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.